Okay, exploration. Now we live in an interesting age. All the islands, all of the continents have pretty much been mapped with satellites. They know how tall mountains are and how deep the oceans are and whatnot. There is nearly a unlimited amount of information that you can get off the internet with just a click away. But we should never stop exploring because exploration is a physical expression of intellectual passion. Exploration is not necessarily something that's going to pay very well. It's kind of a funny job title to have, but you can have a wealth of knowledge. So, my trip around the Americas. So, to take one step back before I get started in all this story, I was in Ohio in 2004. I didn't really know nothing about sailing. I bought a boat off the internet for a couple grand. You don't buy a boat sight unseen. You know, you don't buy a car without driving it around the block. But I didn't know anything about sailing, so whatever. So I started in the Chesapeake Bay, first time in Maryland, and I got out the bay okay, and I got down towards Georgia. Now, people sail for 30 years and don't get hit by lightning, but for some reason, within the first 3 months, I got hit by lightning, blew the antenna off my mast, and threw me across the cockpit and fried all my electronics. I didn't have insurance, of course, because I didn't even know you could get insurance for a boat at the time, but which shows you where I was at. But you know, that's the way it goes. So anyways, I get the boat back together, and I'm feeling okay, get down to Florida. Now, 2004 was a bad year for hurricanes in Florida. They got hit by 4, I got hit by 3 out of 4, and that was the end of that for that boat. And yeah, so it hit a piling, smashed in, I was on it, no fun. But I wasn't going to stop. I kind of liked this whole thing. I had a goal that I had set. First was to ride a mountain bike alone through Southeast Asia, which I did in 2002. I also wanted to sail alone across the Atlantic Ocean. These are goals I set when I was about 18 years old. I'm 31 now. So I wanted to keep at it, and I knew it was just going to take time. I was able to get a boat that was badly damaged in a hurricane. Now I'm thinking, wow, I got this great deal on this 32-foot boat. I can stand up in this boat, which was nice. And but what I didn't realize, if you buy a busted-up boat, it's going to take so much money to fix it up that you might as well have bought a nice boat to begin with. But the advantage of the situation is that, I guess, just like if you buy a busted-up old car, you will know every nut, bolt, every screw, every hose, every wire. When you wind up alone in the ocean, because I sail alone quite a bit, then at least you'll know how to fix it. Nobody's going to be there to help you when that happens. So anyways, I sailed off to Europe and Africa and the Caribbean and back alone. And I get back to Annapolis, and I come up with this trip. So this is a nonstop, single-handed circumnavigation of the Americas. I think this is my pointer. You guys see that? All right, so you start in Annapolis. You head up. You go between Canada and Greenland. This is the Northwest Passage up here in the Arctic. And then you go around Alaska, down and around Cape Horn, and back up to Annapolis. Now you do this alone. You do this without stopping. It's nonstop. Means you don't stop. You don't tie off to a dock. You do not drop an anchor. You do not get towed by another vessel. You have to do the entire trip under your own power, whether it's wind power or engine power. Now my engine broke somewhere around here. But, the wind keeps on blowing, and luckily the mast didn't break. Now, this entire trip was 27,077 miles, and it took me 309 days to do 27,077 miles. Now, this was the boat. It was a 27-foot 1971 boat, Alban Vega, made in Scandinavia, probably worth about $5,000-6,000. My boat was not quite as pretty on the inside as this one, but it didn't have a table. But I could not stand up in a boat without hitting my head. For the most part, I had to crawl around on my hands and knees. All this middle section was covered with a big fuel bladder because I needed a lot of fuel. You're heading up to the Arctic. You're going to need fuel in the Arctic. There's no gas station or anywhere. Even if there was, I'm nonstop trip. I couldn't stop at it even if I wanted to. But with all the stores and everything, I put about 2,500 pounds of gear in a boat that weighs about 5,000 pounds, which means the water line was way underwater. It was heavily overladen, and it was kind of a slow, sluggish trip up to the Arctic. Now, I guess I should, first off, why would anybody do this kind of trip, I guess? Why would you want to do all this crazy stuff? So, some of my heroes are, of course, polar explorers, Amundsen, Scott, Shackleton, so on and so on and so on. And also the big sailors who went around the world nonstop, especially in the 60s, Bernard Moitessier, Knox Johnson, the original first guys to go around nonstop. Now, you look at your heroes, you look at these guys, and the only way, I imagine most of us are curious how we stand. Not that you can necessarily stand in their shoes, but how do you compare to these men that you idolize? And the only way I could really think about it doing it is trying to do something like they did and see how I compare to them in that way. Now, I'll never be the great sailor that Moitessier was, but, I'm okay with that. I can still get the job done at the end of the day. So that was part of the reason that I wanted to do this. Now, also, I wanted to do Northwest Passage, and I wanted to do this around the world trip So what I did is I combined the two trips. So I had a long distance offshore trip that was nonstop, and it was about the same distance anyways, and nobody had ever done it before. So I'm the first person in history to have ever done it. So it's kind of an interesting element. Now, another big element was CRAB, is Chesapeake Regional Accessible Boating. This is a nonprofit organization that gives sailing opportunities to people with mental and physical disabilities. So I was doing volunteer work for them. The main guy, Don Backey, I said, hey, Don, why don't you let me take this boat up the Arctic and we'll raise some money? And I thought he would laugh at me, but he's like, all right, sounds good, So that's how it started, and kind of snowballed from there, and I got the boat, and it came from just the Arctic to around the Americas to nonstop, and my natural tendency in life is to make plans grow and grow and grow until they can't grow any further, and then make it happen. Also, I'd like to thank Crosby, who was one of the sponsors. I raised about $35,000 for this organization at Cape Horn, and then they got involved, and I raised over $120,000 thanks to the help from Crosby. So thank you, Crosby. Thank you, Gillian. So you need food and you need water, of course. So what I did is I had 800 pounds of freeze-dried food. It's more or less astronaut food, and you stick it all in a boat. So you had to cut holes in a boat and shove it in everywhere you can, try to fit it. It more or less boils down to eating soup every day. So I just soup and stew, soup and stew. I had soup coming out of my ears. The nice thing about this food, though, is you can heat it up and eat it up. So you don't have to spend much time cooking things and boiling things. You're just bringing it back to life. You're rehydrating it, and that's all you're doing. I actually really enjoyed the food on anybody who spent any time out in the wilderness, hiking up mountains or whatever, you find yourself eating something that tastes really good that if you were on land, you might not think tastes so good. So, it's one of those type of situations. So I was always happy to have food. And of course, you're in the middle of nowhere. It's nice to have something to eat. Now, water, I had this manual water maker that I had to pump a bunch of times. I had to pump it for about 45 minutes to fill a glass of water. Yeah, and so all I had was water and coffee, So by the time I had pumped the water to make my coffee, I was already wide awake. So, but it's nice to have some coffee, It was like a ritual for me. But anyways, I figured out at about 1,500 pumps a day, I'd pump that thing at least 405,000 times throughout the duration of the trip, which I guess is a good workout of some sort. All right, so I head out, and this is my favorite iceberg pick, by the way. I head out of the bay and head up. The water maker broke at one point. I called a friend of mine, and I didn't have much water, reserves, and I had a sat phone with very few minutes on it. And say, hey, what's his name? Was Simon. Hey, Simon, man, I got this thing broke. What am I gonna do? He's like, call me back in 24 hours. So he set up, because he's got this magical touch somehow. He's sailed 1 million miles or something. He set it up so some boat came off Newfoundland and threw me this water maker and told me, hey, go north, or something and strong. I'm not very good at the accent, but he says something strong, so I go north, and so you're getting up into the icebergs. Now this is my favorite iceberg pick that I took. It looks like something the Egyptians would have made or something. But the problem is that this is a nice sunshiny day. Normally it's not like that up there. Normally it's a lot of fog, a lot of wind. Often it's either you have no wind or a ton of wind. So the problem is you get up there. I didn't have a radar on the boat because we just didn't have the money to have a radar on a boat. Sometimes in life you just got to make do with what you have. And you will meet people if you're involved with sailing that wants to do this trip. I want to sail to Europe. I want to sail the Pacific. But they're waiting for the perfect boat. They're waiting for the perfect equipment. You just got to go out and make it happen. If you want to do it, and use what you got, and hope it doesn't break. But if you fixed it yourself, then you know how to work on it at least if you installed it yourself. So I get up into the ice, and I would do these. It would be all foggy, and I would have to stand on the tiller. I'll do 50-hour watches, so I'll do 50 hours on, and I'll do 3 hours off. So 3 hours. Kind of stop the boat, heaving to, kind of stop the boat with the sails, and then 50 hours on and 3 hours off, and you just kind of dodge anything that comes out of the fog, and you get all sleep deprivated, and but it kind of makes it a little easier in some ways. And at one point, I went in to grab something, and my fuel bladder was leaking. So I was trying to save this precious fuel, and I was filling up everything. I had like a solar shower and my empty bottle of Screech that guy gave me when he came out and threw me my water maker, and so I filled up everything I could, but in the chaos of trying to save this stuff, I was forgetting that I'm surrounded by icebergs. So I look out the corner of my eye and I see this big giant wall of ice just like right next to me. And so I run out real quick and I'm able to throw the helm over hard. And I came within one wavelength of the waves were coming from behind me, so it would have picked me up and thrown me up against a berg. That would have been it. So I just narrowly got around that. The problem is though, once you get around that, the big guys, even in the fog, you can see them fairly far away, but they're surrounded by little bergs. Little bergs fall off the big bergs. And of course, underneath the water is a whole lot more ice than we're seeing right here. So you have these bergs that are just like the size of a basketball above the water and the size of a SUV below the water. And when you have white caps, anytime you have wind, you have white caps. It's hard to tell what's a white cap, what's an iceberg. and you're sleep deprivated and all the rest. So you're just kind of doing your best to go along. Of course, a 27-foot boat made out of fiberglass, it's not going to be too friendly with the ice. They don't really like each other. So you get up in the middle of the Arctic in the Northwest Passage. A great thing about the area is that, you know, I sailed the smallest boat in history through it. Very few people sail through it. Now it's happening more and more because of climate change. There is 40% less ice than there was 100 years ago or something. So, you know, you're now able to get through in one season. There's still fog, there's still icebergs, there's, you know, polar bears and all that fun stuff. But at least you can make it through. So I got out in the middle, and one thing I didn't expect, these are narwhals. I don't know if you guys know narwhals. It's that whale with the big horn coming off of it. So, but the interesting thing was that the narwhals, they never see people, so they don't know to be afraid of the boats. So they just like hang out with the boat. They don't even know to like be afraid of it because so few people get up there to where they are. So this is north of Alaska. This is, you guys seen Deadliest Catch. So this is about 1,000 miles north of where those guys are. Now, Alaska on the north coast is okay, but as I got down through the Bering Sea, 2 typhoons came. Now, I didn't realize you get hit by a typhoon in the Arctic, but because of the ice, the lack of ice, the decline, typhoons and storm systems are able to go further north than before. So anyways, I spent 10 days battling these storms to keep myself from getting shipwrecked, and it came pretty close a few times. And the water is so cold up there, when you stick your hand in it, you get a burning sensation instead of a cold sensation. So it's a lot of fun, you know. I would highly suggest you all sail the Arctic. But anyways, so I get down and I get into the Bering Sea, and I get into an area called the Mixmaster where several currents come together. I didn't know this area was called the Mixmaster at the time. And then, you know, it's blowing 45 knots or something, and a big rogue wave comes, hits the boat, more or less flips me upside down. Well, mostly upside down. I had mast way under, and I was rolling around on my cabin top, and cans of food were hitting me, and water and all that fun stuff. But the boat righted itself. Nice thing about an older boat is they have a lot more weight in the bottom of the keel, and it was a narrower boat, so it was able to right itself pretty quick. So more or less crisis evade. Let's see what this next one is. Whoop, can't go on there yet. All right, so you head out. It is 10,000 miles from the islands of Alaska down to Cape Horn, so 10,000 miles. I had to beat into headwinds. I don't know how many of you guys had to beat into the wind, but it's no fun, even powerboat, sailboat, whatever. So I had to beat into the wind for 41 days. It started to warp. If you think of the fiberglass as the skin, then the bulkhead would be the skeletons. So the fiberglass started to warp around the bulkheads themselves from beating in the wind so hard, and it pushed me so far across the Pacific that at one point I was closer to New Zealand than I was to Cape Horn. But anyways, eventually you get into the westerlies, and these are nice happy waves. And but it's not this guy. See, the problem is behind this guy is another one just like him, and behind him is another one just like him, and so on and so on. Every 12 seconds is another one just like him, and it goes on for 24 to 36 hours. And I had 4 of these in a row where it was just big, gigantic waves throwing my, you know, pick my little boat up and just throw it, you know, and my whole thing, it's like those little Christmas shakers where you shake it in a little, but except I'm flying around in there instead, you know, no fun. But Cape Horn was actually pretty nice. The day I got around the Horn, it was blowing maybe 30 with 15-foot seas, which is really nice for that region, believe it or not. So I started getting growth on my boat after I got around the Horn, and twice I sat with a knife hanging off the back of my boat ready to cut these things off. And I couldn't do it because they're my only friends. I've been alone for so long that I couldn't get rid of them, you know. I let them live the entire trip. They flourish, you know. They're like an ant farm, but they don't move as much as ants, kind of. But anyways, my friend, the growth. So I get back. Yeah, it's a pretty boat, by the way. You got to work hard for that paint job. But I get back day 208. I can see the start and finish line was the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, the Bay Bridge Tunnel. It's just where one track goes over the other track, and therefore it's done. So I can see it. It's right there. And then the wind dies, and we had strong northerlies up in this part of the bay, which, up by Baltimore, whatever, that flushed out the bay, so the tide didn't change. So I can see the thing, and then I get pushed backwards 16 miles. I'd been awake for like 3 days at this point, and then the current tries to push me into the beach. Now, my engine had been broke for like 15,000 miles or something like this at this point, so my engine is nothing but, dead weight. So I spent that night within a half mile twice of getting washed up on the beach after 308 days and 27,000 miles and being able to see the finish line and nearly winding up on Virginia Beach, which, although the only way a person can truly fail is to not to try. So if you give it all you got, I mean, I'm not that I'd be saying this if I got washed up, I'd be saying a lot of exploited deleteds, but nevertheless, if you as long as you give it all you got and you give it your best and you try your hardest, you don't truly fail. So also, it's important to understand that you have to take risks in life. Reward lives in the house of risk. Now, risk also has 5 brothers that lives in that house, so you got to be careful what door you open. But nevertheless, you have to take risks in life, or you will not accomplish anything. And you have to be able to have hard work and sacrifice. We can all do incredible things with hard work and sacrifice. It's the sacrifice that usually gets people, because people don't want to do whatever the uncomfortable situation is, the thing that you don't want to do to accomplish that goal. But if you buckle down and you make it happen, now I can't say everything is going to necessarily happen, that all your dreams and goals, but like I said earlier, as long as you give it all you got, then you didn't truly fail. You did your best. And it's also important to be able to conquer your fears. Fear is an important part of the human psyche. It prevents us from doing things that normally would get us hurt. But, fear can also be a preventative. It can prevent you from doing the things you want to do, and that can be a huge variety. There's a whole world of fears. In this particular instance, I had to accept the fact when I left the dock that I might never come back. And it wasn't easy to accept, and but I accepted, okay, had a good life, and I'm going to do my best, and it's not a tragedy if you die doing what you love. So when I got out in the ocean, there was no fear. Now, I'm not a fearless guy, but, fear becomes panic. Panic becomes injury. Injury becomes loss of life or loss of vessel. And it all starts with fear. And there is no room for that when you are alone on a boat in the middle of the ocean. You got nobody else to turn to. You have to be able to keep a cool head. You have to be able to, remain calm. And you have to be able to put yourself in that state before you get into that situation to begin with. Now, I can't say how other people can, cure their fears or whatever. I would suggest that you work hard to attain your goals. The larger the goal, the more work is going to be involved to make that happen. But we're all capable of incredible things. So thank you very much.